the Towering Inferno.
It's out of control. And it's coming your way.
The Towering Inferno, 1974. They survived the fire, but not what came after. It was the biggest disaster movie of its time. A 138-story skyscraper, engulfed in flames. And a star-studded cast fighting to survive the impossible. But in the years after the smoke cleared, the fire didn't stop. It crept into their real lives. Slow, quiet, and merciless. Because the Towering Inferno wasn't just a film. It was a funeral rehearsal. And one by one, the cast took their final bows. In silence. Candle Steve McQueen, the king of cool, who fought fire on screen, and cancer off it. Candle William Holden, the builder who watched it all burn, and drank himself into the ashes. Candle Fred Astaire, the dance legend who gave his only Oscar-nominated performance, and faded in shadow. Candle Richard Chamberlain, Robert Vaughn, Robert Wagner, O.J. Simpson, Jennifer Jones. All touched by the blaze. Some consumed by it. They played heroes. They played cowards. They played victims. And then life did what the flames couldn't. It took them. This is the true story behind the stars of the Towering Inferno. A tribute to the legends who stood tall in the fire. And fell when no one was watching. Let's begin with the man who stood on the edge of a burning skyscraper. Calm, focused, and utterly unstoppable. The man who made every entrance feel like destiny. The man who made cool look effortless. But in the end, not even Steve McQueen could outrun the fire. Steve McQueen, the fire chief who faced the flames, and lost to the one he couldn't see. He played Fire Chief Mike O'Halloran. The no-nonsense leader who looked the blaze in the eye. And never blinked. In the Towering Inferno, McQueen didn't need long speeches or dramatic breakdowns. He just needed a glance. A growl. A plan that might work, and the guts to go down with it if it didn't. Because Steve McQueen didn't act brave. He was brave. But the real fire? The one that took him? That was inside. He was born in 1930, and by the 1960s, he wasn't just a movie star. He was a myth. Bullet. The Great Escape. The Getaway. Every film built his legend taller, harder, faster. He drove the cars. He did the stunts. He refused body doubles. He lived like every day might be his last. And maybe deep down, he knew they were numbered. By the time the Towering Inferno began filming in 1973, McQueen was at war, not just with the industry, but with himself. He fought with producers. He demanded top billing. He battled Paul Newman for equal screen time. And yet, he delivered. Every frame of him as Chief O'Halloran feels real. Not a performance. But a man who's already seen too much. And in a way, he had. In the late 1970s, McQueen's health started to fail. He was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare, aggressive cancer caused by asbestos exposure. Yes, asbestos, the same material used heavily on firefighting sets and props in old Hollywood. He tried everything. Experimental treatments in Mexico. Alternative medicine. Isolation. But nothing worked. On November 7, 1980, Steve McQueen died in a clinic in Juarez, Mexico. He was just 50 years old. He left behind a legacy of grit, speed, silence, and tragedy. He was the king. He was the rebel. He was the fireman who saved the building on screen. And couldn't save himself off it. And now, he's smoke. He's legend. He's gone. Now let's step into the office of Jim Duncan, the man who built the tower. And watched it burn from the top down. He had the money. The power. The view. But when the flames came, None of that mattered. And neither did it for the man who played him. William Holden. A legend of golden Hollywood who died in darkness, with no spotlight left. William Holden, the builder who watched it all collapse. On screen and off. In the Towering Inferno, Holden played James Duncan. The real estate mogul whose skyscraper was a monument to pride. And whose shortcuts helped fuel a fire that couldn't be contained. He wasn't the villain. He wasn't the hero. He was the man who said, "We don't have a choice, it's going to burn whether we like it or not." And that line. It echoed far louder in real life than it ever did on film. Because William Holden knew all about things burning down. Born in 1918, Holden wasn't just a movie star. He was the face of classic American masculinity. With films like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, Oscar winner, The Bridge on the River Kwai, The Wild Bunch. He had it all: talent, charisma, gravitas. He could do comedy, war, romance, tragedy. And he always looked like he knew something the rest of the room didn't. But behind that calm intensity, Holden carried a secret fire of his own. Alcoholism. Years of drinking began to erode everything. His relationships, his reputation, his body. By the time the Towering Inferno came along, he was in his mid-50s. Handsome, poised, but already fraying at the edges. The fire in the movie was fake. The fire inside him wasn't. In the early 1980s, Holden was living alone in Santa Monica. His drinking worsened. He became reclusive. And then, the ending no one talks about. On November 12, 1981, Holden fell in his apartment, possibly drunk. He hit his head on a table. He was bleeding, conscious, and didn't call for help. He died alone, of blood loss. His body wasn't found for days. From Oscar winner to a forgotten silence. From Hollywood royalty to a man no one noticed was gone. William Holden helped the Towering Inferno soar. And then he crumbled quietly. Just like the tower he built. Now we follow the man who once danced on air. Light as smoke, elegant as moonlight. And found himself in the Towering Inferno. Not to twirl, but to burn slowly in sorrow. Fred Astaire gave the performance of a lifetime in that building. Not with his feet, but with his face. And behind the smile was a life winding down like a lonely melody. Fred Astaire, the dancer who faced the fire, and took his final bow in silence. He played Harley Claiborne. A lonely con man with a soft heart. Trying to start over late in life. He wasn't running. He wasn't scheming. He was just, hoping for something gentle. Before it all came crashing down. And for the first time, the world saw Fred Astaire not as a star, but as a man. It earned him the only Oscar nomination of his career. At 75 years old, Fred Astaire wasn't just famous. He was immortal. With Ginger Rogers by his side, he redefined what it meant to move. He didn't dance. He floated. He gave us Top Hat, Swing Time, Funny Face, Easter Parade. And decades later, when everyone else had faded, he stepped into a burning skyscraper and stole the screen without ever lifting a toe. Why? Because he didn't need choreography to show heartbreak. He just needed his eyes. But Astaire's final years were marked by loss. His wife died. His body aged. He turned down most roles, except those with soul. He rarely spoke of his legacy. He hated interviews. He feared the spotlight would one day return, but find a man he no longer recognized. In the late 1980s, his health declined. He battled pneumonia. The music had stopped playing. On June 22, 1987, Fred Astaire died in Los Angeles. He was 88. There was no performance. No curtain call. Just a legend. Closing the final chapter. With the same grace he brought to every stage he ever walked. Fred Astaire survived the fire in the Towering Inferno. But the fire inside him, the brilliance, the ache, the elegance, burned out quietly. Now we turn to the woman in white. Delicate, poised, clinging to a child in a tower engulfed in flames. And behind her eyes, something more terrifying than fire. Grief. Because Jennifer Jones didn't need to pretend to be heartbroken in the Towering Inferno. She was already living it. Jennifer Jones, the angel in the flames who carried her own hell inside. She played Lissalette Mueller. A quiet woman trying to rescue a little girl from the fire. She moved gently, spoke softly. And when the elevator cables snapped, she was gone in a flash of smoke and glass. It was one of the most haunting deaths in the film. But Jennifer Jones's pain didn't start in that tower. It started years before. And she carried it with her until the very end. Born in 1919, Jones was a Hollywood phenomenon. She won an Oscar at 25 for The Song of Bernadette. She was stunning, talented, and married to one of the most powerful producers in the industry, David O. Selznick. But behind the studio glass, her life was crumbling. Selznick controlled her career, her scripts, even her public image. She suffered severe depression, struggled with identity. And after Selznick's death in 1965, she attempted suicide. She survived. But she was never the same. In the Towering Inferno, she gave everything to her brief role. One of her last film appearances. And it felt like a goodbye. She retired from acting soon after. Disappeared from the public eye. And spent the rest of her life in almost complete isolation. When her daughter tragically took her own life in 1976, Jones's heartbreak became permanent. She turned inward. Quiet. Private. The golden starlet became a shadow. On December 17, 2009, Jennifer Jones died at age 90. No big headlines. No red carpet memorial. Just a soft exit from a world she once ruled. But never belonged to. She walked into the fire to save a child. And disappeared. Just like that. Jennifer Jones didn't just act the pain. She was the pain. And the Towering Inferno wasn't her last film. It was her final cry for peace. Now we focus on the man in the suit. Smooth. Calculated. Always composed. In the Towering Inferno, he was a senator. Trapped, polished, privileged. In real life, he was Robert Vaughn. A man who played power like a second skin. But couldn't escape the slow fade of a Hollywood that eventually forgot him. Robert Vaughn, the politician who survived the fire, but not the fade into obscurity. He played Senator Gary Parker. A calm voice in chaos. A symbol of order trapped in a storm of steel, smoke, and rising flames. He didn't scream. He didn't panic. He represented the system. And made you wonder if the system was even worth saving. And that's exactly what Robert Vaughn did best. He brought elegance to arrogance. Intelligence to self-interest. And made you believe in characters you weren't sure you should trust. Born in 1932, Vaughn made his name not in movies, but on television. He was Napoleon Solo in The Man from UNCLE. One of the most iconic spy roles of the 60s. Suave. Clever. Impeccably dressed. He was James Bond, with a conscience. But Vaughn wasn't just an actor. He had a PhD in communications. He was politically outspoken. even writing a book criticizing Hollywood's role in the blacklist era. He was one of the few stars who could debate, act, and write with equal force. But fame, as always, has a fuse. And Vaughn started burning out quietly. After the Towering Inferno, roles came. But slower. He moved into character parts, then commercials, then silence. In his final years, he kept working. TV guest spots, indie films, voiceovers. He never stopped. But Hollywood stopped watching. In 2016, Vaughn was diagnosed with acute leukemia. On November 11, he died at age 83. Just 11 days shy of his 84th birthday. There were tributes. There were headlines. But most people under 40 didn't know who he was. The spotlight had moved on. Robert Vaughn survived the inferno. But like the senator he played, he walked out of the flames into a world that no longer cared. No fire. Just a slow, cold fade into the dark. Now we turn to the most infamous name in the cast. A man who ran faster than anyone in America. Until the truth caught up. He wasn't the lead. He barely spoke. But after the Towering Inferno, he became the most watched, debated, and haunted figure in modern history. O.J. Simpson didn't just survive the fire. He walked straight into a storm far worse. O.J. Simpson, the guard who escaped the flames, and became a national firestorm. In the Towering Inferno, he played Jernigan. A building security officer who saves a cat. Guides survivors. And stays calm while chaos erupts around him. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't central. But audiences liked him. The strong, quiet type, stepping up when no one else would. And at the time, that's exactly what O.J. Simpson was to America. Born in 1947, Simpson was a football legend. A Heisman Trophy winner. A record breaker. A hero on and off the field. He had the smile, the charm, the all-American glow. Advertisers loved him. Hollywood welcomed him. He wasn't just an athlete. He was a brand. And the Towering Inferno helped push him further onto the big screen. From there, he starred in Capricorn 1. The Naked Gun trilogy. Countless commercials. He was everywhere. Until everything changed. In 1994, Simpson was arrested and charged with the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The trial was the most publicized in American history. The chase. The glove. The verdict. It divided a nation. It shattered a legacy. He was acquitted in 1995. But convicted in the court of public opinion forever. In 2008, he was sentenced to 33 years in prison for armed robbery and kidnapping in a separate case. He served 9. By the time of his release in 2017, O.J. Simpson was no longer an icon. He was a shadow of a man. Followed by ghosts. He died on April 10, 2024, of prostate cancer. He was 76. No blaze. No sirens. Just a name. And the wreckage left behind. O.J. Simpson entered the Towering Inferno as the rising star. He left the world as a fallen myth. Not burned by fire. But by truth, scandal, and time. Let's close the circle with a man who played one of the slimiest cowards in the Towering Inferno. A character who cut corners. Lied to save himself. And let others die in his place. On screen, Richard Chamberlain was the villain you loved to hate. Off screen, he was something entirely different. A private man in a cruel public world. Fighting a fire no one could see. Richard Chamberlain, the son-in-law who jumped first, and burned quietly for years. In the Towering Inferno, he played Roger Simmons. The slick, ambitious son-in-law who cut corners, faked confidence. And made sure everyone else burned before he did. He was the first to run. The first to lie. And the one who looked you in the eye as the tower crumbled behind him. And Richard Chamberlain played him perfectly. But what most viewers never knew was that Chamberlain had been running his whole life from a fire he couldn't name. He was America's TV darling in the 1960s. Dr. Kildare. The noble heartthrob. Every girl's fantasy and every studio's safe bet. But behind the magazine covers, behind the roles in Shogun, the Thorn Birds, the Towering Inferno, he was a man living in fear. Because Richard Chamberlain was gay. And in the ruthless Hollywood of the 60s and 70s, that was a death sentence. For your career, your image, your soul. So he hid. For decades. He played straight, smiled politely, dated women for the cameras, and buried himself in scripts that let him escape. Only in his late 60s did he finally come out. Long after the headlines had moved on. He said he was finally free. But freedom came late. And the years had already scorched the best of what he could have lived openly. In his final years, Chamberlain lived quietly in Hawaii. Far from the cameras. Surrounded by silence. Not scandal. And on March 29, 2025. He died at age 90 from complications of a stroke. No headlines blared. No ceremonies streamed. Just a quiet notice. For a man who had once ruled millions of screens. But never got to fully rule his own life. Richard Chamberlain didn't die in the fire. But he burned, quietly, for decades. Until the flames finally went out. And all that was left was the truth. They survived the flames. But not the fire that followed. They built the tallest tower ever filmed. They set it ablaze with fear, fame, and fight. And when the smoke cleared, the real tragedy began. Candle Steve McQueen, the fearless chief who stared down flames and fate, and was gone by 50. Candle William Holden, the proud builder who bled out alone, far from the spotlight. Candle Fred Astaire, the dancing icon who gave one last performance, then faded with elegance. Candle Jennifer Jones, the haunted soul who walked into the fire already carrying one. Candle Robert Vaughn, the calm senator who survived the blaze but was forgotten by the industry. Candle O.J. Simpson, the unlikely hero who became a real-life villain in a world more terrifying than fiction. Candle Richard Chamberlain, the man who ran first in the movie, and hid from his truth for decades, until the final fire came. They weren't just actors in a disaster film. They were giants, each carrying their own blaze. Some visible. Some silent. But all devastating. Some died young. Some died old. Some burned fast. Some burned slowly. But the Towering Inferno didn't just consume a fictional skyscraper. It left embers in the lives of those who made it. And now, only smoke remains. Only names on granite. Only echoes in the firelight. This wasn't just a film. It was a funeral in disguise. And we're here to remember those who didn't make it out.